Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the video. I'm GetGoodGuy, and today we're looking at one of the new support options from the recent patch, that being the P08 Artillerie, which used to only be available for the vehicle classes. I'll be going through its in-depth stats, which are available from Something.com, and comparing it with relevant competitors. This will hopefully help you to answer the question as to whether it's worth using it or not. I'll also link to the other videos I've produced recently for the added weapons and variants from the June patch in the description and my pinned comment. Now, as the P08 Artillerie is essentially a primary weapon variant of the P08 sidearm, I'll be discussing it as a primary weapon and comparing it to other relevant primary weapon selections. Then at the end I'll quickly go over how it compares to its sidearm counterpart. So let's get into this. Well, the P08 Artillerie has damage figures of 30 as a maximum and 15 as a minimum. This could be seen as pretty low damage capability. For example, the autoloading extended of the medic class does 38 damage at max and 22 at minimum, whilst also firing 60 rounds per minute faster than the P08 Artillerie. This is because the P08 fires at just 299 rounds per minute. Or what about comparing it with the C96 Trench of the assault class, as that's a somewhat similar feeling weapon? Well, the C96 Trench has a higher max damage stat by 4.73 hit points, whilst having the same minimum damage. This is all while again firing 60 rounds faster and actually holding 8 more bullets than the P08 Artillerie. The M1903 Experimental of the Scout class is then in the same boat here for these stats, so we're off to a less than encouraging start for the P08 Artillerie. But let's move on. Now to range and damage drop-off. Well, the P08 requires 4 shots to kill out to 22 meters, then 5 out to 28 meters, 6 out to 34 meters, and 7 from there onwards. To compare again, the C96 Trench and the M1903 Experimental require just 3 bullets to kill up to 12 meters, and then have many other ranges where they again require 1 less bullet to kill than the P08 Artillerie. Add to this that it has a pretty slow muzzle velocity stat of 370 meters per second, and you've basically got a weapon that's just straight up poor at range. And I mean, obviously, it's a variation of a pistol after all. On the bright side, it does have 33 rounds to utilize per reload, which is a lot and means you can take on multiple enemies without having to reach for more ammo. And then when you do need some more, the reload is actually pretty snappy, taking 2.6 seconds to reload from empty and 1.7 seconds to reload if you have bullets left over. So what about recoil? Well, in terms of vertical recoil, although it didn't feel all that strong when I was using it, it is actually worse than you might expect. For example, the Selbstlader M1916 Factory has an upwards recoil value of 1.1, whereas the P08 Artillerie has a value of 1.4, and this is really made to look bad when comparing with the C96 Trench and the M1903 Experimental once again, both of which have upwards recoil values of 0.36 and 0.28 respectively. Then the horizontal recoil isn't great either, with a value of 0.4. This is manageable, but some way worse than the vast majority of medic rifles, whilst again being embarrassed by the C96 Trench and the M1903 Experimental. Then throw in that recoil decrease is actually pretty average to mediocre with a stat of 4, and well, I mean, there's just not very much positivity jumping out here, but we'll carry on. So now ADS spread whilst not moving, and for the P08 Artillerie, this is genuinely poor. For example, the Howl Factory has a stat of 0.15. Why did I choose to highlight that stat? Well, it's because the P08 Artillerie has a stat of exactly double that, standing at 0.3, and once again, this is worse than the C96 and the M1903, but it does have a surprisingly strong ADS spread stat while moving, which stands at 0.5. This compares favourably against a lot of weapons, so the P08 is a pretty good choice for close quarters strafing. Plus, the weapon excels most where hipfire spread is concerned. It beats out the majority of weapons here, including the M1903 Experimental, but it is worse than the C96 Trench again, and by some margin. Oh, and we're back to pretty mediocre stats again when we get to spread increase per shot and spread decrease. So in terms of a primary weapon, the P08 Artillerie is lacking. It's not a strong option. In fact, it's an objectively weak option. Your best bet with it is to try to stick to close quarters, strafe a lot, and fire from the hip when possible. You're going to be at a disadvantage a lot with this one, but it is still possible to do well, although it will generally require quite an able player. I will say that it's more versatile than another option that dropped for the support class in the same patch, that option being the Peeper. I'd 100% say I think the P08 is better than that, and overall it's a decent option in terms of non-LMG weapons for the support class, but this of course doesn't necessarily make the weapon itself a good choice overall. And then to quickly go over the differences between the artillery and the sidearm variant, well, the sidearm P08 only has 9 rounds, a worse muzzle velocity, slightly worse recoil, somewhat worse standing still ADS spread, and worse damage drop off, but it does have a better deploy time, better reload times, and better hipfire spread. So some people might actually prefer the P08 pistol, which is kinda sad really, but obviously as a primary weapon, the P08 Artillery is better suited to that role. I just feel though that it's a weapon that's lacking in many departments, both in terms of my experiences with it and based on the stats, which can't really be argued with, and this makes sense as it was originally a vehicle class weapon, and DICE don't want people spawning into vehicles just so they can then use the primary weapon. Although admittedly, this hasn't stopped the Fromastop Auto from being a very powerful choice. So, what do you think? Do you like the P08 Artillery? Is it worth using, or will you stick to your normal support weapon of choice? If so, what is that weapon? Let me know in the comments below. Now, let's go over to the Board of Awesome for the epic people who allow you to get content from me full time by supporting the channel on Patreon. Without their support, I literally would not have the time to make this many videos as I'd need to go and get another job. So thank you very much to everyone on here. If you want to join them on the Board of Awesome, the link to the Patreon page is in the description and in my pinned comment. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you don't want to miss future videos, turn on notifications with the bell button and select to always be notified on the options tab that should then pop up, and then feel free to like, share and subscribe. I'm GetGoodGuy and I'll see you next time. Laters.